The following is a panel discussion conducted by Peggy van Scoyoc, author of the book Desegregating Cary. This book is a compilation of oral history interviews conducted with longtime residents of Cary, North Carolina, as they told their personal stories about their experiences with the civil rights movement and desegregation. This event took place on October 25, 2010, at the Page Walker History Center in downtown Cary. There were approximately 50 people in the audience. The panelists who joined Peggy in this discussion were Charlie Adams, son of Henry Adams, Gwen Matthews, Lucille Evans Cotton, Deborah Matthews Wright, and Carolyn Rogers. Welcome to our panel discussion about the book Desegregating Cary. This book is, as many of you may know, is a compilation of oral history interviews that were done throughout about a 10-year period of time, believe it or not, with 43 people whose voices made it into the book, telling us, Cary, their stories and their memories about their experiences during civil rights and during the desegregation process here in Cary. So before we get started talking to our panelists, I'd like to give you just a little bit of a history on kind of how the book came about, and also a little background history on the whole movement that took place. I started this book was conceived with my first interview with Gwen Matthews in 1999, December of 1999, quickly followed by an interview with her sister, Deborah Wright. And then very shortly after that, I interviewed Charlie Adams. I'll be introducing them a little more in detail in a minute. And as I drove away from these three interviews, I was so moved by what they had to say that I just, then I thought, we've got to find a way to get this information out there into the world. And it took 10 years, but we finally got there, many more interviews later. So just to recap very briefly, as many of you know, in 1954, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus the Board of Education that it was unconstitutional to segregate schools by race, and that it was now mandated that all segregated schools had to desegregate. In 1955, the North Carolina General Assembly voted that all the local school boards could figure out for themselves how they wanted to go about doing this. It was up to them individually to decide how they were going to do it, but they had to do it. This all fell under the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the HEW department in Atlanta. They would not dictate to any community how to go about desegregating the schools. They just told all of the communities that they wanted to see the plan before it was implemented. They wanted to approve it. So, back in the 50s and 60s, there were two school boards in Wake County. There was the Raleigh City School Board, which was the urban inner city school system, and there was what was then called the Wake County School District, but it was the rural schools outside of Raleigh City, and those schools that district included Cary. So, Cary was just a small community, as many of you may know. In 1963, there were 5,300 people in Cary, that's all. But it was growing, and at that time, there was basically one white school in Cary. It was then called Cary High School, but it was really for grades 1 through 12, and it was at the head of Academy Street, and that was it. But it was starting to burst at the seams, and so they decided they needed to build a high school. And so they did. They built Cary High School on Walnut Street, which is where it is today. And it opened in the fall of 1960. Up until that time, there was a man in Cary who we're going to be hearing a lot more about. His name was Henry Adams. And Henry was a pharmacist, and he owned Adams Drugstore on the corner of Academy and Chatham Streets. In 1957, he sold his drugstore to a man named Ralph Ashworth, who still owns it today. And then Henry moved across the street and opened an appliance store, which he ran until his death. But Henry was a member of 2 school boards. He was on the Wake County School Board. He was also the head of Cary's local school board, the Cary Advisory Council. And Henry was a visionary. He saw desegregation coming. He firmly believed that it should be done, it needed to be done, and it was possible. And as he thought through how this could be done, he realized that to bring this to Wake County, he decided he needed to start with his own community. So he decided that the first school in Wake County to be desegregated would be Cary High School. So he put a team of people together, including the rest of the Cary board members and other local citizens, members of the black community, and members of the NAACP in the area. And they sat down and they started hammering out a plan. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. They sent it off to the HEW in Atlanta and waited nervously, and it was approved. Once it was approved, then they had to figure out how they were going to go about doing this. So at that time, there was a black elementary school in Cary. In fact, an early school in Cary for the black elementary school students was called the Cary Colored School. It stood behind the playing field of what is today Cary Elementary School. And it mysteriously burned down in 1936. It's pretty well known it was arson, and it was never proven. So the elementary school kids didn't have a school, and the black families in Cary got together and they made it happen. They built a new elementary school, which today is Kingswood Elementary, or Kingswood School, which is on North Academy, or off of North Academy Street in that area. But there weren't enough black high school students for a high school in Cary. So once the students got through the 7th grade at Kingswood, they were bused to Barry O'Kelly High School, which was in Method, which is a part of Raleigh. I'm not even sure it still exists, but the school no longer exists. But it was across the street from the state fairgrounds. And so that's where they were bused. And that's where they attended school until they graduated. So when Henry's plan was blessed by the HEW, he went to Barry O'Kelly and he met with PTA and the principal of the school and said, "We want to desegregate Cary High School, so we welcome black students. Please send us some of your students." So they put their heads together and got together, and they selected 6 girls to attend Cary High School for the very first time in September of 1963. This was very early. It was done voluntarily, long before they were forced to do this. It went, according to all the powers that be, it went extremely smoothly. We didn't have any race riots or whatever in Cary. So it went so smoothly that Henry's vision came to pass, that it did become a model for the rest of Wake County to follow and how they would go about desegregating other schools. And word spread throughout North Carolina, and in fact, word spread throughout the South. And there were communities in other parts of the entire South calling up little tiny Cary and saying, "How did you do it? What's your plan? It's already been tried and proven, and we'd like to copy what you did because it worked for you." So Cary became a real leader in desegregation because of their efforts. So, now I say that it went very, very smoothly. Well, that's according to the people who put the plan in place. But how smoothly was it for those students, those teachers, those administrators? We may be hearing a little bit different story tonight. So having said all of that, I would like to introduce to you one by one our panelists that are here with us tonight. So I will introduce them in kind of a chronological order and how things played out over time. So I'm going to start with Henry Adams' son, Charlie Adams, who's sitting right here. This is what Charlie had to say in his interview with us from the book that got into the book. My dad, Henry Adams, was involved with the local politics and the Cary Advisory Board. It seemed like he served on that forever. He wanted to make sure that Cary had the best school in Wake County. I can't remember how many terms he was on the Wake County Board. He was on the Board of Education on 2 levels. One of his goals was to do everything he could to try to start the integration process and get the black kids going to Cary. So he gathered a group of people together to develop a comprehensive plan to desegregate the Cary school. My dad told Mr. Cooper, the principal, "We can't integrate Wake County until somebody is willing to step forward and do it locally. As a member of the school board, if I'm trying to integrate Wake County, I can't give it lip service and not do it in my own hometown." So he felt very strongly that Cary should be the first, and that in Cary, desegregation could go smoothly, and the rest of the county could follow suit. My dad, Mr. Cooper, 2 or 3 of the local advisory people, a couple of the Wake County people, and the Evans family, and the principal of the black school sat down and developed a game plan for how many students would come the first year, who they would be, and where they would come from. Obviously, the black community put some of their best kids forward, and then each year there was supposed to be a geometric progression of the black kids coming to our school. So they had a really solid game plan that was overseen by the Wake County Board of Education, the City Advisory Board, and all the key players were involved. I was teaching at Cary High School from 1962 to 66, and each year it got bigger and bigger. I started out with 1 black student in my homeroom, and then I had several in sociology the next year, and then the following year I had quite a few. They just didn't send the entire black community over and say, "We're integrated." There was a great deal of rhyme and reason given to this plan by the black and white community. It was well planned so it wouldn't backfire and it wouldn't fail. I remember in our den meetings being held with my dad, Mr. Cooper, a couple of the county board members, and a couple of key players in Cary, black and white. I remember them working night after night after night, putting this thing together, reviewing it, laying it aside, going off, coming back, picking it up, and looking at it again. The HEW in Atlanta had to bless the plan before it could be put into practice because it was just the beginning of desegregation, and they didn't want to see it fall on its face. The HEW did not come in and tell Cary how they should go about integrating their schools. Because they were voluntarily desegregating the school, they were never under any fire guidelines or ultimatums, like many other cities and counties operated until later when they were being forced to integrate. Here it was voluntary progression. And then when they submitted it, I remember how delighted they were when they got the word back. The plan was totally acceptable. They were told, "What you're doing is good, we applaud, you proceed." In Wake County, Cary was the first school to officially and formally integrate and had the first black students. Cary was absolutely being watched by the other communities to see what was going to happen here when they brought those black kids to school. Are they going to have a race riot or have a war, or are they going to burn down the school? What is going to happen? And then it went so smoothly. Cary was a leader. So, and then he said, "I coached and taught at Cary High for 4 years, and later I was hired by the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I served 17 years as an assistant and then the director of the association from 1984. Charlie just this year retired. So I will turn over to Charlie to say a few words.
It has to be a few words because she said everything. I don't know why she had me out here. The only thing I can say is I know this had to be difficult on the I heard my dad over and over say, separate is not equal. And I grew up with that, thinking that, there's no way you can have the black school and the white school and everything be equal. So that was ingrained in my head very early on. And the other thing that he always said was, integration is coming. Let's be a leader. Let's get on out front. Let's get it done. And I can't help but look at three of my all-time favorite people, Mike Smith, Jane Smith, and Pat Smith, Sweeney. And they came along at a time that there were no Lumbee Indians in the Cary school system. They came from a tri-racial county in Robinson County, came into an all-white setting, and no fanfare whatsoever. Mike was one of the best basketball players ever played for Cary, went on to UVA, played basketball there. Pat, one of the best looking ladies that ever attended Cary High School.
Keep talking.
I wish I'd have known how pretty you were going to be when I was younger. And very active. She was a cheerleader. She was involved like Mike was in school activities. And I heard Mr. Cooper say many, many times that Jane Smith was absolutely the best teacher in Wayne County. So and she's still a very beloved Spanish teacher from Cary. But my point here is there was integration before it became a black-white. And then another family moved in later on, the Gray Boys. I'm not sure when they came. But just think about, if you want to really know what desegregating is, to come from a tri-racial county into an all-white system. But I looked at the Smith family and never realized that they were anything other than just like me. And coaching Mike, being a teacher with Jane, seeing that attractive young lady grow up, they were just like us. And so, I don't know, I think probably the proudest thing that I would have to say here tonight is I had a mom and a dad who really believed that there could not be any separate but equal, that we had to have the same thing. My dad had the drugstore at that time. Every black family in Cary had to come in there to pay their light bill, their phone bill, or buy their bus ticket to Raleigh. It was one of those stores. I'd say many of the blacks in Cary were his best friends. There were numerous times that I would see the principal of the black school, a couple of the board members, they'd be huddled up in the drugstore, or they'd be on our back porch or in our den talking about this plan long before it ever happened. When I graduated from college, it was being talked about then. That was 1959. And I went in the Army and I'd call home to see how things were going. And my dad would always say, we're making progress. We're going to make this thing happen. We are not going to be a segregated system. So when I got out of the Army, it still hadn't happened, and I went to Delaware and started coaching. And I would call again to see what was going on in the local school, what was going on in Wayne County, and he would tell me, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm absolutely dedicated and committed to Wayne County being the first segregated unit. And he said, I cannot get anything done unless I lead Cary in the direction of being the first school in Wayne County. And he had total support from the black leaders. And contrary to y'all in here, I've gotten older. And remembering all these names that were so fresh in my mind back when I was that age, skipped me now. But I wish I could pull all the names of the black leaders, the people who were key players in this, who sat in that drugstore, sat in our house, and worked out a game plan that wasn't for the benefit of the blacks, wasn't for the benefit of the whites, but it was an effort to bring the two races together, because at that time, whites lived on that side of the tracks, blacks lived on this side of the tracks. As you heard Patricia say, that we had two different school systems. We had two of everything, two churches, everything was totally segregated. But what I found out was my dad, who went to Trinity before it was Duke, he had a sister in Durham who had a drugstore down at 5 Points. And he said he learned very early how his sister treated the blacks in Durham. that she called them Mr., Mrs., Miss, the way it should be. And so she sent him to pharmacy school in Massachusetts. And when he came back, she said, I'm going to help you buy a drugstore in Cary. And all the time that I was growing up, I remember how many African Americans, of course we referred to them as blacks and not African Americans, and how many of them came into the drugstore, and how many of them would go back and talk to my dad, and how many he would charge whatever they wanted for the month, and how many of them worked for him. Particularly when he went into the appliance business, he had several that worked for him on a regular basis. The last memory I have of my mother, Jane, was sitting out on her back porch teaching her caretaker how to read the Bible. And she did that for years. She had many black people who were friends of hers that she actually taught how to read. And that was the last memory I had of her shortly before she died. She was still doing it because she taught for 40-some years before she lost her eyesight. But I was part of growing up and hearing it and seeing it and seeing a small community which was segregated but who had a wonderful relationship among the townspeople. And I saw those townspeople come together and say, we, not the blacks, not the whites, we're going to make this work. And I'm sure you could have some people in here today that would say, it was terrible, it was awful, it was worse than what you're portraying. But by the same token, if you look at the bottom line and how it ended up, Cary became a model, not just for Wake County, not just for North Carolina, but nationally because of the blacks and the whites coming together and putting together a plan and a program that was approved. And many of them were turned down before the paper was even cold. This one passed, first time through, and that was unusual. And I think that there was a huge celebration at that time between the black community and the white community, saying, now we have a chance to move forward and see what we can do. And I honestly know that my dad's proudest moment, whatever happened in his life, was that he was able to be part of helping Cary to desegregate, helping Cary to become the first school in Wake County, and helping Wake County to become one of the first in the country. So he would be incredibly proud to sit here tonight, read this book, and realize that these things did happen. And as Mike recalls, when they were getting ready to shut Barry O'Kelly down, I was a basketball coach at Cary. And they had just won the state the year before. You ladies remember that? Well, I was the only white face in that gym for game after game after game. But I thought, Mike's graduating, I need a center. Steve's graduating, I need a guard. Ted's graduating, I need a forward. So Bill Hookup was the coach then. He and I got to be the best of friends because I tried to recruit all those kids. They said after this year, Barry O'Kelly is shutting down. And Pete Williams, who was over at Lincoln, said, Charlie, don't you mess with my players. But anyway, that I think she gave you a really good definition of my family's role in this. And even though I've been in Chapel Hill for the past 43 years, I still think if you cut me, I bleed green, and I'm all about Cary. And I'm so glad that a book has been written and the story has been told. And thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Charlie. So next on our panel is Miss Gwen Matthews. She was the first one I interviewed, and I will read what she had to say. In 1962, my father was very active in the NAACP. Integration was just getting started, and there were a few schools in the state and a few in Raleigh that were being integrated by that time. In 1963, Cary was more rural than it is now. It took a year's preparation to develop the desegregation plan for Cary. They chose 6 of us black students to be the first to go into Cary High. They were trying to get 1 black student in each grade. My cousin and I had always been together at school, and we were in the same grade. They selected both of us to go to Cary High and decided there would be 2 black students in the 11th grade. There was 1 in the 9th grade, 1 in the 10th grade, 2 in the 11th, and 2 in the 12th grade. I knew all of them because we were at the same school together. Frances White and Lucille Evans were the two seniors. I lost my place. Oh, Brenda and I were in the 11th grade. Phyllis McIver was in the 10th grade, and Esther Mayo was the freshman. They decided to only send girls that first year. I was not given the choice. My daddy told me, "You're going to Cary High next year." I protested, "Oh, but Daddy," to no avail. It didn't take part in the I didn't take part in the decision-making process at all within my family. I did what I was told. It was not cruel. His message was more, "This is something you must do. I believe you can do it, Gwen, and it's not up for discussion. I know you're leaving friends and everything else, but you're going to leave it." I cried and I went to Mother and said, "Please make Daddy change his mind." She said, "No, I can't do that." I had great friends at Barry O'Kelly and great teachers that I had to leave. Throughout those 2 years, we did stay in touch, but when you leave one environment and go to another, it becomes difficult to bridge the gap because our worlds were just so different. I could not replace those lost years at Barry O'Kelly. As I prepared for my first day at the White High School, my father and I had a discussion about how to act and what to do, what not to do, how to respond, how not to respond, and certainly not to retaliate. The first week was extremely difficult. Brenda and I were on the same bus because we lived on the same road. When we got to Cary High and stepped off the bus, there was a crowd of people standing in front of the school blocking our way. They were all chanting, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate. I don't think I have ever seen so many red, angry faces in my life. As we tried to enter the school, nobody ever touched us physically, but they blocked our entry. They tried to spit on us, but none of it hit us, and we were called lots of ugly names. Because my parents and Brenda's parents were members of the NAACP, it was crucial for us to go all the way through and graduate from this white school. So we faced that crowd. A few years after graduating from Cary High School, in 1971, Gwen was the first black woman to graduate from Meredith College with a bachelor's degree in English. So she desegregated 2 schools in her lifetime. In 2006, the African American Alumni Chapter at Meredith College established the Gwendolyn Matthews Class of 1971 Scholarship to honor her accomplishments and recognize her as a trailblazer for the school. After graduating from Meredith, Gwen went to Teachers College at Columbia University and completed her master's degree. She eventually began teaching English and serving as department head at Wake Technical Community College, and eventually moving into the Academic Advising Center. So, Gwen.
I'm not quite sure where to go from there. Probably in discussing, you heard her read about the standing and trying to get off the school bus in the 2468. And that, I was 16 years old, almost 17, and that was probably the most difficult time of my life. I did not know what to do with so many angry people. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking, I'm 16 years old, I'm a little browner than you, I'm not quite sure what the issue is here. All I know is you don't like me. But I had been taught or encouraged to like you back. It took me years. It took me quite a few times, going through my life to resolve in myself the white issue, the issue of being liked, being respected. It took me a while. It took me a while, and to be very honest, it took me a long time to appreciate and understand and feel comfortable around white males. Why? Because I'm short in stature. And so when I'm getting off the school bus and I see this crowd, the tallest people in the crowd were the males. And they were the most angry faces that I saw. And because of that, it was difficult for me to relate to white males. Yes, I was friendly, yes, I was, but I did not and could not let my guard down because of the image I still carried with me for a lot of years. And so as I began to go through my teaching experience, it became easier and easier to let my guard down and just accept people as people, because I certainly didn't want to do to others what had been done to me. I did not want to dislike someone just because, even though at that time that was pretty traumatic for me. So I began to examine that and to look at myself and to do something. I went to a church once and was a speaker in kind of a sitting situation like this. And probably the most healing thing that happened was a white male stood up and said, "I'm sorry, Gwen. I'm sorry for the problems that it has caused you throughout your life. And I ask your forgiveness." And that became my healing point, the start of my healing point. And so I was beginning, at that time, I could go through and get some relief from the pain. But everything was not so difficult. There were 2 students in one of my classes who befriended me. And you have to keep in mind, if they talked to me, then they lost their friends. So they couldn't really talk to me. They couldn't really interact with me because it was difficult for them. And I didn't want them to lose their friends. I lost all mine, all my way, Barry Kelly. where I had grand fun. I was a cheerleader, I ran track, I was singing in the glee club, I was a funny woman there, did drama and stuff, funny drama. But my life there was great. I begged my dad, don't let me leave Barry Kelly. This was my comfort zone. This was where I enjoyed being. This is where I, if you want, was somebody, because I had lots of friends there. And so to leave that environment, which was a very warm, nurturing environment, and go to a very cold, sterile environment, or environment certainly not knowing what to expect, was very difficult. And I absolutely, positively did not want to do it. But my dad was in the military. And I don't know if you know, but you probably do know that military men folk don't lose their militariness. And so it was, well, that's it. And so I could not get out of it. But as I look back over that time, and it was a very difficult time. I know a lot of preparation went into it. I understand all the things that Mr. Adams says. I do, and I respect all of that. But being 16 years old and going through that experience was not a good time for me. It was not fun. I did not enjoy it. I didn't want to do it. And I didn't have any friends, and I wanted some friends. By the time I got to my senior year, it was a little easier because I went in my 11th grade year. So from the 1st grade through the 10th grade, I had been segregated all of my life. I've been in an environment where it was all of us, and it was fun, and it was wonderful enjoyment. And then in 11th grade, all of that stopped. It became an entirely different picture for me, and the way I looked to see what was going on out there in the world. As I look back on it now, I can probably say I'm glad. I'm glad because I think it taught me a lot about myself, even though I had to work through some issues that I had from going through it. But it certainly taught me a lot, and I'm appreciative of the fact that going from Cary High to Meredith College was really, truly going from night to day. The issue in Meredith was simply that I was there. If they wanted to talk to me, they did. If they didn't, they didn't. Probably one of the funniest, a couple of funny things that happened at Meredith. The first question was, when it started getting warm, do you tan? Well, we just don't need to. And the other was about our hair. And if we can do different things with our hair. So sometimes, one semester I might have straight hair. Another semester it was really, the fro was really big. I might have an afro. And so the question came, how do you do that? And so it became very, very interesting. Probably one of the most, and by that time I learned to handle myself a little differently. So one of the young ladies said to me, I've never been around a black person except my maid. What was my reply? I ain't your maid. And that young lady and I became friends. We became great friends. She thought that was a good comeback. And yes, I'm an English major, and yes, I do Meredith, there were some difficult times in Cary. But as I said, we learned a lot. And it was not all peaches and cream. It was not a time in my life at that time that I wanted to go through. I did not absolutely want to do it. But I did learn a lot. And I made some friends from it. Over the years, I've seen some of my classmates. And some of them have a pause. I said, I'm so sorry. I just didn't know any better. And I know that. You know, I know that. They didn't know any better. You know, what were they supposed to do? You know, they had their friends. I was interrupting their environment in a sense. You know, I was coming into their environment and changing their surroundings. And we, not this I, but we were coming to do that. So it was a time where we all learned something about ourselves, I think, and learned something about the times, and learned something about how to live this life that we're living in even now. So it was a different time. It was a difficult time. I learned some things about myself. And, you know, I don't believe I would change any part of it. I don't believe I would have had anyone to come running up to me and say, oh, welcome, welcome. Oh, so glad you're here. Great. It's a good thing. It's going to be great. I'm glad they didn't. Because then it would not have been real problem. Then we would not have had to go, we would not have learned what we needed to learn about each other and to go through life in a very different place. So it was a time of learning for everyone. We made it through. I can imagine how, and I do it. I started to say about the two people. There was a young man and a young lady who befriended me. And we had a locker side by side. And sometimes on one side was one of the young ladies who befriended me. On the other side was someone who simply didn't like me. And that person moved the locker. It had to be changed to another locker. And that was fine. I mean, it wasn't fine. I don't mean it that way. But, you know, as I look back, I understood that. But they simply did not want to do anything. But, you know, sometimes I think people don't understand or recognize some of the very little things that can take place. And I'm just going to throw this out. Sometimes over the years, as I would shake hands with those who are white, I would see them do this. I would see them, you know, as if they were, I don't know whether they're wiping off the blackness or what, I'm not sure. But you see those kinds of things, you adapt to those kinds of things, and you learn to go on. You learn to go on and live your life and say, hey, that was that person. You know, it's not every person. And so it was a learning experience. It was a time of learning something about myself and the society that I grew up in and lived in, because I lived in a very tight-knit community. I lived in one that I know how many, not that, some very young people can lift a little voice. I lived in a community where, and we were all one night on my street, we were all related. So if I got in trouble at this house, I could get a whipping in every single house down until I got back to my house. You know, if they wanted to. Those times are gone now. But if they wanted to spank me all along the way, you know, because I'd done something at Miss Elizabeth's house or my aunt's house, you know, I could have gotten spanking all along the way. So I lived in a tight-knit community also. But it was a time of learning. It was a time of understanding now that I look back on who I am and what I've done. And sometimes, and even over the years, it took me quite a while to accept myself, to understand who I am as a person. That has nothing necessarily to do with my color, but I am who I am. And so it took me a little while even to make adjustments there and to accept me and who I am now. So thank you for listening. Thank you for the book. And if you have questions later, I'll certainly be glad to answer.
One freshman, one sophomore, 2 juniors, and 2 seniors. I was going to be one of those seniors. 20 black families put in applications for their children to attend Cary High, and the ones that were best qualified were chosen. I was told that we would be carefully watched while at Cary High, and if we got into any trouble, there would be somebody there that could help us. I wonder if that played out for any made me feel very uncomfortable and very unwanted. The 6 of us would always sit together in the cafeteria, but there was not another black student in any of my classes. Some of the students would speak to me when there was when there were not any other people around. But when class ended, if we walked out of the classroom talking, the minute we got out of class and into the halls, they would skip ahead of me so that other people wouldn't know they had actually been talking to me. And they were mean. They would call me names. The school bus stopped right up the street from my house, and I was always the first one on the bus, so I never had a problem getting a seat. But the bus driver would always take off before I sat down to try to make me fall. So I started to sit on the front seat. That way, as soon as I got on the bus and he would take off, I'd be in my seat. I had to change to another bus to go to the high school. It just so happened that my second bus was from Morrisville, and where another black girl lived. So when I got on that bus, she was already there, and I always had a seat because nobody would sit beside her. That worked out well. But they were mean on the bus. They would throw spitballs at me. In English class, I sat in the second row from the front. Kids sat behind me with one empty seat between us, and they would continually push their seats into my seat. Sometimes the teacher would say something, and sometimes she wouldn't. So I would get up and take the seat out from between us, and then they couldn't push it into my seat anymore. There was another black girl in my English class, and they would hound her and push the seats into hers and do everything mean. And she would just sit there and take it and cry and sniffle. But I would move the seat away, and then they couldn't push it into mine. They were still mean and calling names. In my English class, they had an election for a student to take charge of the class when we first arrived. They thought they were being facetious, so they nominated me. So I took over. I brought the class to order and asked for homework and asked if they had any questions, and then I turned the class over to the teacher. This role was for only 1 week, and then somebody else was supposed to be nominated. They never nominated anybody else after I took over. I guess I was doing a good job. But there were a lot of instances where I hated all the name calling and the bad treatment. Changing classes, the kids were always bumping into me or making cracks about me. Sitting in a classroom, I would look out the door and see 2 people peeking in with their heads together, whispering and pointing at me. So Lucille did graduate from Cary High as well in May of 1964. She attended Wake Tech Community College, and she received a certificate as a ward clerk. She attended Raleigh School of Data Processing and received a certificate as a data processing operator. She worked at Hudson Belk as a cashier and counter person. She worked at Almay Cosmetic Company as a lipstick flamer. And I asked her, what is that? And you put the shine, put the shine on the lipstick. She worked at Balsam Cookie Factory, did I say that right? As a machine operator, and she retired from there in 1993. And then she's married. She married her high school sweetheart, Herbert Cotton, and they have 3 children, and they have 5 grandchildren. And she also attends the Lincolnville AME Church, and she loves to work with the children, telling children's stories, and in her spare time she writes poetry. And she's had 2 poems published. So Lucy.
Long, so that gives me a good reason not to have everything that I wrote was true. They said that we were welcome. We were not welcome. We were treated terribly. Not by everybody, just some of them. And one of my experiences was when the Beatles came out, and they had this hairdo. And the next day, for some reason, I did not turn around and look back. They were pointing at their hair, telling me that I was trying to be a beetle. You ever seen a black beetle? But my mom must have been standing at the door when Gwen's dad was talking to her. I came home from, it was during the summer, she came from a meeting. She says, you're going to be going to Cary High next year. I did not question her because when Mama speaks, that's it. You don't question Mama. If she said I'm going, then I'm going. So I didn't think anything about it. I figured everybody else was going too. Until I got there, they were not there. But Mama told me when I would come home in the afternoon and tell her everything that went on in school, she says, you are just as good as they are. There's nothing that they can do that you can't do. So whatever they dish out, you can take. And if they can't take it, they shouldn't dish it out. So what they did to me, I did it to them. If they threw spitballs at me, if I saw who it was, I threw spitballs back. If they tripped me down, stick out the foot when I walk by, when I see them coming, I stick both of them. So they couldn't, take it, they shouldn't have dished it out. Anyway, I always went to the games. I went to football games. I didn't understand it, but I went. And I was the only one of us there. And I went to basketball games. I even went to the junior senior prom. My husband and I, we were the only ones there. And we had a good time. We even went to the after party. We were the only ones there. But whatever activity, I tried to be in it. And then the next day, after a game or something, and I get to school, I get on the bus with my friend, and I says, I went to the game last night. She said, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. And so when we meet at lunchtime, she says, oh, yes, you did. You went to the game. Because by then, it was all over the school, and everybody was telling everybody, yes, who was at the game. So everybody knew if I was there. And one day, I took home economics, and we were sewing, and I had my sewing kit, and I had a pair of scissors, and I didn't have time to go by my locker to put my scissors back in my locker, so I took them with me to my English class. And we were in English class. That was my favorite class, because remember, I was just, let me take over. Okay, so a teacher from across the hall sent someone in and asked my teacher, Mrs. Crook, if she had a pair of scissors she could borrow. So Miss Crook says, no, I don't have it. Does anybody have a pair of scissors? I says, I've got a pair. They thought I had the scissors for protection or as a weapon. And I let them think that. But I had no more problems. They didn't treat me, as bad as they did. I should have took my little scissors a long time ago. But I let them think that that's what it was. But on a whole, I really enjoyed it. It was an experience that I wouldn't want to do again. But it was good. And by the way, I had 3 grandsons to attend Cary, and one of them graduated from Cary, and then the other 2 were transferred, but they went to Cary, and they were saying, Grandma, you do really good. I mean, Grandma, at Cary, I was a senior, I was hot stud. Tell them some of my experiences, and they thought it was so funny, but I didn't think it was funny at the time. But anyway, I went to Cary, I graduated from Cary, I did not go back to Cary, but it was an experience, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it. So thank you.
In 1965, there was a law passed which supposedly gave everyone the freedom to choose the school their children would attend. My parents asked me if I wanted, maybe they learned something. They asked me if I wanted to attend all-white Swift Creek Elementary School. I'm not certain that I understood the ramifications of agreeing to go, but at the age of 10, as I entered the 5th grade, I was one of 4 black students to integrate Swift Creek Elementary School. My first day was awful. I don't think my parents understood what it would be like for me in terms of the day-to-day interactions at school. From their perspective, they saw this as an opportunity for me because I would be closer to home and would not have to ride the buses long. They also recognized the distinction between the quality of education in the black schools and the white schools, so attending a white school would be advantageous because I would supposedly get a better quality of education. Getting to school that first day, being one of 4 black students, we had to stand the entire way to school on the bus. We were never given an opportunity to sit down, even though there were plenty of 2-person seats on the bus. One white child would sit in an aisle side seat to keep us from sitting down, so we stood for the entire time from when we were picked up until we arrived at school. The bus driver did nothing because that's just the way it was. And of course, during the ride to school, we were teased and ridiculed the entire time. In school, it was the same scenario. The white children took it upon themselves to mimic us and ridicule us and make fun of the obvious physical differences between us and them. This was a daily occurrence. The 4 of us were not in the same class. My cousin was in the 1st grade, a boy was in the second or third grade, I was in the 5th grade, and a friend of mine was in the 6th grade. I was all alone as the only black child in my class, which was pretty traumatic. The second year, there were one or two people who began to actually talk to me, which was somewhat comforting. But for those 1 or 2 children who began to talk to me, eventually they were teased for it. So I had no real relationships or friendships in school, just acquaintances who took the time to talk with me. The first year, the teacher did not treat me too differently outwardly, but she did not do a whole lot to try to keep the other children from teasing me or to keep them from saying things to me, even when she heard them. The first year academically was a good year for me. Then I went on to the 6th grade and had a very kind teacher that year. The school went to grade 7, so I was at Swift Creek for 3 years. By the 7th grade, there were a few more black students, but we were so spread out that there was still only 1 black child per class. Deborah graduated from Cary High School. Then she also went to Meredith College, where she obtained her degree in psychology and sociology. She then became a college counselor at St. Augustine College while completing her master's degree from NC State University. Today, Deborah is now the Director of Human Resources at North Carolina State University. She is also a minister. She has her own ministry. So, Deborah.
My goodness, what an opportunity. What an adventure. I was 10 years old. What did I know? So we decided as a family that I would go and I would attend Swift Creek School. And it was, as you've already heard, it was a traumatic experience. But the difference is, and I certainly appreciate the Cary High School experience, but the major difference there is that I was 10. I was 10 years old, and those gigantic, who seemed gigantic teenagers, men, who my sister faced, for a 10-year-old, that was even more traumatic. Because those same men rode the bus. So I wasn't at Cary High School, but I was on a bus where it had mixed students. Elementary, junior high school, middle school, and high school. So some of those high school gentlemen, and I use that term loosely, were on my bus. And so it was quite an experience for me as a 10-year-old. You've heard what was written about having to stand on the bus the entire time, holding our books and trying to hold on to a seat as we're also trying to carry our books at that particular time. And so it was an experience that I don't think, as my sister indicated, that anyone that has been through would really ever forget. My master's is in education, and I find it interesting that in this day and time, there's so much study about what happens to children when they experience certain things and when they have certain situations and certain experiences. And I think it would be interesting to do a study about what happened to us. How did this affect people like me? People in the civil rights movement, other children who went to school, who desegregated schools. What impact did that have on a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old? What was the impact? And so it would be interesting to take a study or to do a study on that type of thing too. But then, there were no such studies. And it didn't really matter at that particular time. One of the experiences that I certainly remember, aside from the bus, was a teacher, my 5th grade teacher, my very first teacher in elementary school at Swift Creek. And she wrote a note home to my mother. She sent a note home to my mother. I had no idea what the note said. And I was a pretty good student, if I say so myself. And so when I got home, my mother opened the note, and the teacher indicated that, and to this day I remember her name, she indicated to my mother that my mother needed to talk to me because my grades were so good that I had to be cheating.
Wow.
She actually said, please talk to your daughter. Now, mind you, she had not caught me cheating. She had not seen me cheating. There was no indication that I had cheated. But she sent a note home and said to my mother, please talk to Deborah. She must be cheating. Her grades are very good, and I would appreciate it if you would talk to your daughter and ask her not to cheat. Well, my mother was about my height, but she was a fiery little lady, and she was not happy about that. But it was something that, as my sister indicated, those kinds of things do impact you, because comments and statements and attitudes and impressions and perceptions really have a lasting effect. And I think that over the years, it is something that, as my sister has indicated, that you do have to try to overcome. I went on to Meredith College, and I have to say my experiences at Swift Creek, Cary Elementary, West Cary, and Cary High School prepared me for Meredith College. And so at Meredith College, that indeed was an interesting experience. But I do feel that it all was character building. That regardless of how it feels at that particular time, regardless of how old you are, and regardless of how it feels and what you went through, and we've all heard stories about the civil rights movement, there was something in what happened and in something that was done that strengthened each and every person regardless of what they say. It could do nothing but make you or break you. And it was a situations like that, in many cases, and we've heard many stories, are situations where people did come out more of a victor. And so it's important to understand also that regardless of the situations and the circumstances and the hurts and the tears and the pain, that for many black students, it made us stronger. And as people, it made us stronger. And it made us, and we developed character and strength and determination. And I hope, though, that for the white population, it helped to help white people understand that the differences aren't as different as we may all think that they are. That we do have the same values, the same goals, the same ideas, the same thoughts as other people do. And so I think one of the important things to realize is that, yes, it was a time for us to think about in terms of it was traumatic, but it was also a time that had to happen. It was necessary. And as we look back on it, as individuals, we have to see it as a time that was necessary. It was a time that actually was ordained to be, to bring us all to this place, to bring us all to this book, to bring us all sitting here together in a room like this, to bring us all to a point where we could begin to understand, and like people just for being people. After going to Meredith College, I went to NC State, and I say that it was somewhat ordained because I do feel that each and every one of us have a purpose in life. And I think that oftentimes the experiences that we go through, whether they're chosen or chosen for us, the end result is that it should end up in the purpose that you have and the destiny that you have for being here on this earth. So I went to Meredith, and then I had a position at St. Augustine's College, but then I went to North Carolina State University. And North Carolina State University at the time, in 1983, was predominantly administered, managed, orchestrated by white males. So I have on heels tonight, but I'm all 5 feet tall. So 5 feet and 3/4 inches, I'd like to say, but I'm really. And so as I went into that environment, it was also an interesting environment because I would go in meetings as a black woman, as an African American woman, whatever we would like to use, or say term we like to use, and being all of 5 feet tall, and being in an environment in management that was really unexpected and almost unheard of. And so I would go into a room with all white males, and I was in a position to be a person giving information, or even the person in authority as it related to human resources. But I had to learn to hold my own. And I believe that all the experiences, all the steps that were taken throughout my life, the experiences at the schools that I went to, the ridicule, the conversations, the name calling, hurtful as it may have been, it was all part of who I became. It helped make me be who I am. And it helped me become the best that I could be. Because as I said earlier, it was a situation where you would have to give in to what was expected by the majority, or you had to make a decision that I am not what people are saying that I am, that I'm at least as good or even better, and I have value and I have worth. And so I have to believe that in an unusual, strange sort of way, that it was part of my destiny, that the 6 people who were chosen to go to Cary High School, that it was part of their destiny, and that it all had to be part of bringing society and the town of Cary to a place where it needed to be. And we have to be grateful for that. We have to be grateful as blacks. We have to be grateful as whites. We have to understand that in the midst of all of that, there was good that came out of it. And so if we focus on that, I could focus on all of the unpleasant things. There were many. But I have to focus on what came out of it. I have to focus on the good. And I have to focus on the fact that in some strange way, it was probably part of my destiny. Thank you.
Well, last but certainly not least, we have Carolyn Farah Rogers. Just before I read to you from her interview, I'd like to say that we also interviewed Carolyn's parents, Reverend S.J. and Fiona Farah. So for any of you who've read the book, you may recognize those names, and also her aunt and uncle, Leroy and Betty Farah. So, and Carolyn is here with us tonight as well. So here's what she told us. After graduating from Barrio Kelly High School, I went to Barbara Scotia College in Concord, North Carolina. I majored in English and minored in French. A few years later, I applied for a teaching position at Cary Elementary School. Until then, I had lived in an all-black neighborhood. I went to college in an all-black school, I went to an all-black high school and an all-black elementary school, so I had been in this all-black environment, insulated from the outside world, except for when I was living on the farm as a child. As tenant farmers, we lived in a house on the owner's land. We established a relationship with them that was a cordial relationship. I started teaching English at Cary Elementary in the fall of 1969. I was one of 3 black teachers on staff, along with a PE teacher and a shop teacher. It was just at the beginning of integration, so I was on the rough edges of it. There was one teacher across the hall from me, an older farm lady who taught English too. One day she came across the hall to my classroom and she said, "I want to ask you a question. I want to know why you want to be in my school." I said, "Your school?" "Yes. Why do you want to be in my school? We don't want you here, you know that." I said, "Well, I was hired to do a job and I'm going to do that job the best I know how." As the years progressed, she and I became the best of friends. She invited me to her home. She invited me to her daughter's home. She used to cook chicken and dumplings and bring it to me because that was one of my favorite dishes. We became very good friends. Even when she retired, she would still call me in the afternoons and say, "How you doing, Carolyn? I was just thinking about you." And sometimes we would go back to that conversation when she asked me why I was in her school and she said, "That was just my ignorance showing, but you taught me different." She was able to talk to me about that day. Being an older person, she was brought up in that world where the black stayed in their place and the white stayed in their place, and never the twain shall meet. When she realized that we should all be together and that she was able to actually sit down and talk about it, made a big difference in her life and in mine. She was a very talented teacher, and we learned a lot from each other. I had only one student who had a problem with my complexion. I parked my car on Academy Street near the First Baptist Church. I went to my car one afternoon and the windshield had been bashed in. They discovered that it was one of my students who obviously had a problem with me. He had taken a bat to my car. That was his way of getting back at me. I know that they suspended him, but after that I don't know what happened to him. He never came back into my classroom. Obviously the problem was too deep. I never saw any signs or warnings at all that he had a problem with me. He was always low-key and never got excited about learning. My expectation of all my students was that they would be excited about learning because there is so much to learn. So Carolyn taught at Cary Elementary. She ended up as the assistant principal at Davis Drive Elementary School before her retirement. So Carolyn.
Good evening. I'm not going to speak long, but I understand Jane Smith is in the house. Would you please stand up? Okay. Oh, it's okay. You don't have to. This is Jane Smith, who used to be one of my supervisors. Yes. Hi, Jane. It's good to see you. She was so sweet and so kind to me, and that was so nice to have at that time because you just didn't have many of you, most of you, who were kind to us. And Jane was always so kind and so warm and just so enthusiastic about learning and even teaching me how to teach. I never, ever forgot her. And when I heard you say Jane Smith, I was looking, trying to find her. Absolutely beautiful. And she taught me about Pembroke Indians, the Indians in Pembroke. And it's just been, my career has been a wonderful career. It had its problems, yes. It had its downsides, yes. And the little boy that dashed in my windshield, well, big boy, he was a big boy. I too am, without my heels on, a good 5. And when I take my heels off, the kids would always say, "Oh, Miss Rogers, you're so short." Even Lucille's 2 daughters that are sitting here, they would look at me at church sometimes and say, "Oh, you are short. So I decided I'd wear my heels tonight, so I'm a little bit taller than. But the boy that bashed in my windshield, actually named his bat, and we found out that it had the N word on it, and it said in bat. In other words, it was supposed to do what it was supposed to do. And of course, I never heard from him anymore. Don't know what happened to him. E.B. Comer, I don't know if any of you remember him. You remember him? Yes, Ed Comer was my principal. And in the interview, now mind you, I went to Cary. I was brought up on Evans Road. We moved there in, I knew I was going to forget. 59. Thank you. I knew I was going to forget. I even put a sticker there on that page. I still forgot. But we moved to Cary from Green Level. We were tobacco farmers. My dad was a sharecropper and a tenant farmer. And of course, you know, in that day, whatever you cropped, you shared half of the results with the owner of the land. And my dad, being a very strong-willed man, got in trouble with the landowner because he said that you're taking my money. And because the landowner claimed that Daddy owed him much more than he said he did. And Daddy said, no, I don't owe you anymore. You took my money. So Daddy actually took him to court and won the case, which was good. Now, I have kind of inherited my dad's strength. And I didn't know that until I went through the situations that I went through in the school system. Because I look like I look, I'm not supposed to talk like I talk. And I even get in trouble with that with my own folks. Like, where did she come from? Yeah. But anyway, in other words, Mr. Comer, in our interview, said to me, he says, Carolyn, I understand you want to work here. And I said, yes, sir. Well, it was the only job available, and I needed a job. So I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, during the course of the interview, what are you going to do when we have parents coming up here and they decide they don't want their child in your classroom because of what you look like? I said, well, frankly, I don't have anything to do with that. That's your job. And he said, okay. So then he said, well, what are you going to do when your children say or call you the N-word? And I said, well, then we'll just use that as an English lesson. We'll look it up in the dictionary and then let them decide what I am. And he said, good answer. I like that answer. You're hired. And I thought, oh boy, okay. I was so excited, didn't know what was out there. Really didn't know what was out there. Didn't know quite what to expect until I started working that year. Had a wonderful year, exciting year, had wonderful students. And I had one parent who came to see me requesting a conference. And the reason she requested the conference, she said, my daughter tells me that she can't understand the words you're saying. So I said, is that because I have a southern twang? And she said, no. Well, of course, that was beyond me. I didn't know why she didn't understand what I was saying, because I understood me perfectly. And the mother said, well, she said, you can't talk. You don't speak well. So I said, excuse me? She says, you don't speak well. I said, excuse me? In other words, I was saying, excuse me, because I didn't understand what she was saying. She was Italian and had a very thick accent, so it was very difficult for me to understand what she was saying. And when I brought that to her attention, she said, oh, well, I was wondering why my daughter was saying that, because I understand every word you're saying. Thank you very much. And then another situation we had was open house. And I think you recorded that in the book. Open house was one of those situations where, you know, the parents go to meet the teacher night. Well, I would have so many parents in my room until we would have to bring in in chairs from the other classrooms because they were coming. Why were they coming? They were coming to check me out. And I had one person to come, one father to come, and he was standing 6, 7, and he stood in the back of the room. Well, I was standing in the back of the classroom too, waiting for the parents to come in, and I would say hello to them. And like, was it Gwen or Deborah who said, I think it was Gwen, who said that they would shake your hand and then come. So I would extend my hand every time. Okay, that's okay, that's okay. So I asked him if he would please sit. And he says, no, I'll stand. I said, please sit. There's a seat there for you. No, I'll stand. I said, well, listen, it looks like that we're having a power struggle here. And since I'm the teacher, I'm going to win, so you need to sit. He looked at me and went, well, I guess I will. Very angry with me, and he stayed angry, kept that scowl, the look on his face the entire time. And another situation was when this father came in, dressed in overall, the big overalls, looking really tacky. And he started asking me very high-level, intelligent questions. And I'm thinking, Found out later he was a professor from NC State. Why was he doing that? Why was he asking me those questions? Just to make sure that I belonged where I was, rather. And you had that all during the years. I had people just checking me out to see, why is this woman teaching language arts? Why is this woman teaching English? No way can a black person teach my child English. And I would have one lady come in, and she had Bill Cosby's book. And she had it marked to one particular chapter, and she wanted to know if I knew this. And I said, I haven't read the book. Well, you need to read this book, and you need to read it before school starts. This was the day before school started. You need to read it before school starts. And I said, okay. And that lady had decided that she was going to give me hell for the rest of the year. And she did. She even had my supervisor at the central office, not Jane, to come in to observe me one day. The principal at that time's wife was the head of the instructional services. She came in to observe me that same day, and the third person came in to observe me the very same day, and then my principal. So I thought, that's 4 observations in one day. This is highly unusual. My principal used to come in the mornings, make his rounds. He would stop. We were in an open classroom kind of situation. We had a partial wall that you could pull all the way across to close off the classrooms. And he would come in, and I knew when he was coming in because I was always in the back of the classroom so that I could greet all of my students. He would not stop at the first person's class. He would not stop at the second person's class. He'd come to my classroom every day, every morning. So I'm thinking, why is he doing this? What's the problem? Am I not teaching something right or what? And it was the same day that I had the 4 observations. So I went home that weekend. It happened to be on a Friday. I went home that weekend and I was so upset, so disturbed. And I told my husband, I said, I just cannot go back to work Monday. I don't know what's going on. He's coming in here every day. He never stops in the other 2 classes, and they're white teachers. But he always stops in mine. So what's going on? My husband said, you're a stronger woman than that. You need to check him out. Well, that Monday morning, I said, I'll just wait and see if he's going to do it again. Same situation, very same situation. So I walked over to him and I said, I'd like to see you in my office, please. So, where did that come from? So then we walked into the office, and the teachers have an office, and I said to him, I said, why is it that you do not stop in that classroom? You don't even look in the window in that classroom, but you stop in my classroom every morning. Tell me why you're doing that. Is it because I'm not teaching the way you think I should be teaching? Or I'm not teaching the curriculum? Just what is the questions Friday. I said, well, yeah, that too. But then I'm mainly asking questions about what you did and your role in all this. And he says, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But if you want your observation, it'll be in your box by third period today. I said, fine with me. I never saw him in my classroom again after that. So change comes slowly, but it is worth it. Because out of change comes success. I was not allowed to go to Cary Elementary School because of who I am. But yet I came back to teach at Cary Elementary School. So you never know what road and what path you're going to have to travel in order to get to where you end up. You just don't know. You don't know the plan. But when you look back at the plan, you can see it all taking place. I ended up as assistant principal at Davis Drive Middle School, brand new school. I helped to open that school. And it just so happens I was coming full circle. Across the street from Davis Drive was a tobacco barn. The same kind of barn that I lived in on the farm. The very same kind of barn. And a tobacco field next door to the school. And when I saw that, I said, okay, I have come full circle. And this is where I will retire from. And that is where I retired from. Thank you, Ms. Priest.
Before I close, Charlie would like to say a few more words to us.
These ladies have been very provocative. I think they have shared a lot of information. And Gordon, I couldn't help but think, suppose when we were at Cary, that all of a sudden one day we were told we were going to Ligon or bury Kelly. I think we would have given up an awful lot of the same things that they did. But the nice thing that I heard resonate all the way through is a lot of positives came out of what these ladies had to endure. And I don't think we as white people can even start to understand having to leave the comfort of your school, your friends, your athletic teams, your clubs, and go somewhere where we're starting all over again. So time's going to tell, and I think it already has. My role tonight was just simply say, 50 years ago, a structure was put into place where we could hopefully be where we are today. And I think that has happened, and I think history will record that we had to do what we did to get where we are, and had we not done that, we might still be back where we were. So thank goodness that we are where we are. And that kind of resonated with me the other night. Excuse me. I went to Cary High School's Friday night football Hall of Fame, in which Cary played Green Hope, and they were inducting 3 inductees. I saw black children hand in hand with white children hugging black children. I saw white quarterbacks pass into black ends. I saw white tackles blacking for running backs. I saw black cheerleaders, white cheerleaders, black band members, white band members. I realized then that what the dream had been 50 years ago was taking place out on that field. It was a packed house. There probably were as many blacks as there were whites. Blacks weren't sitting together. Whites weren't sitting together. Blacks and whites were sitting together. Blacks and whites had on the green uniforms, the band uniforms, the cheerleading. And so I'm sitting there thinking, it has occurred. And maybe it did take 50 years. How many of you saw We Are Titans? Okay. Ike Boone, the real-life coach of the Titans, is a long-time personal friend of mine. And I had a chance to talk to him a long time. He was the one that replaced the white coach in the movie, if you remember. And I said, Ike, how was it? I mean, this was real life. The Titans were a powerhouse. They had a white coach. They were supposed to be one of the strongest teams in Virginia the coming year. They went through the integration part. Ike got the job over the white coach. And he said, Charlie, it was everything you saw in the film. He said, that film was as close to being right as anything I've ever seen. And he said the white kids and the black kids fought each other in the beginning. on the bus, for uniforms, for jersey numbers, for everything. He said when the season was over, they were brothers. He said they were hugging each other, going into each other's homes, going to parties together, doing everything in the world. And he said one football season changed the whole thing. But, you know, tough people come through tough times, and I think y'all were tough people. I don't think there's any question about that. I think a lot of people would have succumbed and not done what y'all have done. I'm sorry you weren't in my homeroom. I thought you were. I'm going to go back and check my record. You probably just didn't show up. But it's very obvious you can't stay where you are. We couldn't 50 years ago. Had we stayed where we are, we wouldn't be in here tonight. You've either got to go backward or you got to move forward. And I'm sure a lot of people think, well, we really moved backwards. A lot of whites thought that, a lot of blacks thought that. But today, I think it'd be hard to say that that's exactly what happened, because we have moved forward, we are moving forward, and we're moving forward as black and white, not individuals. And you know, the whole key to this thing is getting to know somebody. There's some sorry white people. There's some bad black people. There's some fantastic white people. And some of my best friends, golly, Papa and I worked together for so long, and she's like part of my family. Sue loves her to death, more than I do probably. I got a deputy director who's an African American. And always my favorite Lumbee Indians will always be the Smith family. Jane, you did well. You did well in producing those two fine folks, and I agree with you. She was one of the best. But, you know, the desegregation plan was presented, and thank goodness it's been recorded, and thank goodness we are where we are. And I really, no more can Gordon can, relate to what a black kid gave up leaving Berryo County and not having a chance to go to Ligon and having to come to Cary with an all-white class, with an all-white basketball team, football, student government, whatever. But fortunately now, we have gone past that, and I think tonight showed several different perspectives. One is just how tough these ladies were, and just how tough the circumstances were for them to deal with. I cannot imagine being spit on, shoved, pushed, talked about. I probably would have been kicked out of school, because I know what I would have done. And I would expect Gordon to have been there to help me do it. But you ladies, you kept everything that you needed to do to get you where you are today, and you did it very well. And each one of you had a nice story to tell, and you came back with a different wrinkle, but each one of you had some things that happened to you that I think all the white people in here, we would say, we're sorry, that we wish that would never happen, and we would hope it wouldn't happen again, because you didn't deserve that any more than a white person deserves to be treated that way, any more than an Indian deserves to be treated that way. You know, when Mike Smith played for me, Mike Smith wasn't white, black, pink, yellow. He was Mike Smith. He was my starting center, one of the smartest kids in school. He made me a good coach. I probably would have flunked out of coaching had I not had him. But you know, if we reach the time that we don't anymore look at color, and we can accept ourselves for the person that we are, the people that we are, and I think we're starting to do that, because you see more and more of it the other night. But thank you for letting me just make a couple of comments.
All I really have left to say is that we owe these 5 people so much. If it weren't for you and your strength and your courage to face what you all faced and what you all did, we wouldn't be where we are today. So we owe you so much. And we're just so these are their stories. And so just a education curriculum, and also to support our Cary Heritage Museum, which is right around the corner. If you have not gone to see it, please stop in there and take a look. So anyway, if you're interested, I will see you at the back table. Thank you so much for coming. That was great. The book Desegregating Cary by Peggy van Scoyoc can be purchased at the following places: the Page Walker History Center in downtown Cary, the Quail Ridge Bookstore on Wade Avenue in Raleigh, or to order the book online, go to caryhistory.webs.com, or order directly from lulu.com, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, or bakertaylor.com.